Next, I'm going to be talking about mixing kicks and bass. Is there a moment in the track where these two things overlap or where they play together? I'll give you an example. If you're using an extended bass line that's say a solid note running throughout, and say you're sidechaining that note, then you're not going to want to have extended kick drums that have the big bass extension as well, because those two things together are, you're just doubling up on bass. However, if at no point during your track the bass line and kick drums are playing at the same time, then you're pretty much good to play around with any kind of kicks you want. So I guess this really comes down to picking the kicks more than the bass, and you should pick your kicks based on what your bass line is and how it's working. In this track, let's have a look. If I just mute the bass, solo the bass group, sorry, and then bring in the kicks. So you can hear instantly, kick one, beat one, bar one, the bass and kicks are playing together. Now when you're going through kicks, you can see I've chucked in a load into this rack. When you're looking at these, you're picking a kick drum. I mean, that, for example, sounds great. So let's grab our kicks and bring them down. So I think that's probably a really good example where it's not necessarily a mistake or a bad thing, but there's definite room for improvement that most people probably wouldn't notice. And the reason I'm saying that is there's these kicks definitely have an extended bass to them, but because the transients are so sharp and they cut through really, really nicely, a lot of people will be mostly paying attention to the transient because that's the loudest, most impactful part of the kick that cuts through the rest of the track, because it strikes at the same time as the bass line. The bass line is doing the low frequency work to your ears, and that's something you need to pay focus to, because what you're not noticing so much is like I said earlier, there are fundamentally two bass lines working at the same time here, and they're going to fight each other. So those second two kicks where there's no bass line, they sound great and that really works. But the problem is this first kick, that extended thud in the low end is just not going to cut it. And it doesn't matter how much I like that kick. For me, I just can't bring myself to use that kick. Same again there. Again, that transient's cutting through and it sounds great. The second two kicks in that phrase sound brilliant because there's no bass notes. But that first kick is just getting drowned. So that's why I ended up picking that, because it's a much shorter sound to it. There's a good amount of body in the kick, but it doesn't extend through the bass note. But again, I can still hear there's a very slight extension to it that just gets, if you notice on kick one, every repeat of kick one, and you can just hear there's almost a clash of bass in there. So what I'm going to do is, in fact I can see it's already there, look, I've grabbed an LFO tool and I'm shaping this, so I'll switch that on. The note I'm shaping is this one over here. So I'm going to switch this on. And you can hear instantly that's just shaping the first beat. Because the second strike of the bass note doesn't actually hit the same time as a kick drum, and then the third bass note is a different instrument anyway, but again doesn't hit the same time as a kick. So if I solo the kicks and the bass group again, that's really cleaned it up. It's just that first bass strike. If I switch it off and on while I'm playing it, you'll get what I'm talking about. So even though there's barely any extension to this kick drum, and there's a good transient, there's a good amount of body, but there is still that low end thud in the kick drum, as pretty much every kick drum has. And because this bass note strikes on beat 1, I've still had to, even though I've been careful selecting that kick drum and making sure I'm picking a kick drum that doesn't have extended bass notes or any really long decays or anything like that, just because of the simple fact that my bass note is striking on beat 1 bar 1, I've then had to give a sidechain effect or manually sort of dial in or shape the gain of the bass line just to allow for that kick to have its thud moment on beat 1 bar 1, and then for the rest of the bar, as I say, the other bass notes aren't striking at the same time as the kick drum, so it's not an issue at all. So it now means that if I wanted to, I could maybe have a slightly more extended kick drum, but it would mean that I would then have to shape a slightly more extended sidechain or lift in gain to the bass line. That's not something I want to do myself. I quite like the kicks just being quite subtle and just cutting through the bass line in this instance, so it's not something I'm going to look at right now, but it is something for you guys to bear in mind when you're working on your own production. So if you've got a really long extended bass line that plays at any point in time at the same time as a kick drum, then you need to either sidechain the bass line or reshape the bass line in some way so that the kick can cut through in the lower frequencies. And then you also need to be very careful that you're not using super extended bass drums at the same time. And hopefully that will give you a much cleaner mix at the end of the day and should sound a lot better.
Give me something, give me something to believe in.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content, and if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.